Decluttering is often presented as a straightforward process. You sort through your belongings, toss what you don't need, and organize the rest. But anyone who's ever attempted it knows it's not that simple. It's a journey filled with unexpected challenges, emotional discoveries, and valuable lessons. Looking back, there are so many things I wish I had known before I started decluttering my home. Today, I'm sharing those lessons with you, lessons that saved me time, energy, and even heartache. Let's start with a truth that can be hard to hear. Your family doesn't want your stuff. When I began decluttering, I assumed my kids would treasure the items I held dear. One day, I mentioned to my son that I was considering getting rid of 2 old leather chairs that had been with us for over 25 years. His reaction was strong. He couldn't believe I'd even think of parting with them. I took that as a sign he wanted them, but when I asked if he'd take them to his apartment, his response was a firm, "Oh God, no." That's when I realized he wasn't attached to the chairs themselves, he was attached to the memories they represented. This realization shifted my perspective. Our loved ones might feel nostalgic about our things, but that doesn't mean they want to inherit them. Instead of assuming, ask your family directly about specific items. Their answers might surprise you and free you from holding on to things you no longer need. Sentimental items can be the hardest to let go of. I'll never forget the time I inherited a clown painting that had been in my family since I was born. It wasn't a cheerful, circus-themed piece. It was a creepy 1970s-style painting that seemed to have a life of its own. Despite its unsettling appearance, my parents insisted it was sentimental. When I brought it home, my kids flat out refused to let it in the house. They were convinced it was cursed, and honestly, I couldn't argue. Eventually, I gave it back to my parents as a joke, and it's now become a quirky family tradition to re-gift it each Christmas. The lesson here? Loving something doesn't always mean it belongs in your life. If you truly value an item, display it and enjoy it. If not, let it go. And if you're torn, take a photo to preserve the memory. It's easier to store pixels than clutter. Decluttering isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. Early on, I thought I had to tackle entire rooms in a single day to make meaningful progress. But life doesn't always cooperate. Between work, family obligations, and sheer exhaustion, it was impossible to maintain that pace. Then I tried a different approach. I set a timer for just 10 minutes and focused on one small area, like a single drawer or shelf. Those 10-minute wins started to add up, and I didn't feel as overwhelmed. Progress became sustainable, and I realized that consistency beats speed every time. Remember, you're not racing anyone. Give yourself permission to pause when life gets busy or when something meaningful comes up. Whether it's grabbing coffee with a friend or attending your child's soccer game, mistakes are part of the process. Letting go can be scary, especially when you're unsure if you'll regret it later. I once spent an entire afternoon debating whether to keep a sweater I hadn't worn in years. Spoiler, I didn't miss it when I let it go. To avoid overthinking, I started using a maybe box. If I wasn't sure about an item, I'd place it in the box and tuck it away for a few months. When I revisited it, I usually found I'd forgotten about most of the items inside, making it much easier to let them go. Even if you make a mistake and regret parting with something, it's not the end of the world. Most items can be replaced. I've even reacquired a few regret items through thrift stores and online marketplaces. And the process was surprisingly enjoyable. Guilt doesn't deserve a place in your home. One of the biggest barriers to decluttering is guilt. Whether it's guilt over the money you spent on an item or guilt because it was a gift. But holding on to things out of guilt only adds to the burden. I once bought an expensive ice cream maker, dreaming of weekend afternoons making homemade treats with my kids. In reality, it sat unused in a cupboard for years. Every time I saw it, I felt a pang of guilt. Finally, I donated it to someone who was thrilled to have it. The guilt evaporated, and I felt lighter knowing it was being used and appreciated. Reframe your mindset. The money is already spent. And keeping the item doesn't change that. Instead, think about the joy it could bring to someone else. Selling your items can turn loss into gain. If parting with your stuff feels like a loss, selling it can be a rewarding alternative. I once sold an old dining set that had been sitting in storage for years. Not only did I free up space, but I also made extra cash to put towards something I truly needed. Even if an item doesn't fetch a fortune, selling it can give you a sense of accomplishment and ensure it goes to someone who truly wants it. Start small, list a few items online or host a garage sale. You might be surprised at how good it feels to see your belongings find a new home. Don't buy storage solutions before you declutter. I used to think that cute bins and baskets were the key to organization. I'd stock up on storage solutions before even starting the decluttering process, only to realize I was adding to the clutter. Now I declutter first. Once I know what I'm keeping, I can choose storage solutions that suit my needs perfectly. Not only does this save money, but it also ensures my home stays organized in the long term. Decluttering makes your home feel bigger. Clearing out unnecessary items creates a sense of space and calm, even if your square footage doesn't change. After decluttering my closets, it felt like I'd gained an entire room. I could finally see and access everything I needed without the stress of digging through piles of stuff. Memories aren't in the things. This was a tough realization for me. I used to think I had to hold on to my grandmother's old teacups or my kids' preschool drawings to preserve those memories. But I've learned that the memories are in my heart, not in the objects. Now, I take photos of sentimental items before letting them go, and I've created a digital album that's much easier to enjoy than piles of paper. For truly special items, I use them. For example, a quilt made by a loved one is displayed and appreciated every day instead of being tucked away in a closet. Decluttering creates joy for others. One of the most rewarding parts of decluttering is knowing your items can bring joy to someone else. I've donated clothes to shelters, toys to local charities, and furniture to families in need. Each time, it felt good knowing my belongings were going to a better home and creating new memories elsewhere. Decluttering is about creating the life you want. At its core, decluttering isn't just about getting rid of stuff, it's about making room for what truly matters. It's about mental clarity, emotional freedom, and the joy of simplicity. If this resonates with you, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more tips on simplifying your life. And I'd love to hear from you. What's the hardest thing for you to let go of? Share your story in the comments, and let's support each other on this journey.